You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, silver prices trading at 13, maybe 14-year highs at this point. I just looked at my screen, $36.50. I mean, finally, the world's catching on, but someone who's caught on a long time ago, who's actually predicting history before it gets written, Bob Hoye. Bob, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, hi, Kerry. Good to be with you and our listeners out there.
Absolutely, and it's always great to connect with you. So hey, let's not talk about politics. So the politics are the direct outcropping or outgrowth of economics. What's happening now? Where are we now? I mean, we got $3,300 gold. That seems to be resistance at this point. $36.50 silver. We're talking U.S., of course. Where does that leave us?
Yeah. Well, we'll just, this has been a great financial bubble. And the first one was the South Sea bubble in 1720. And then the ones that followed, like 1929 was number 5, was number 6. And each of them carried remarkably similar patterns as you went through it, although the speculative public doesn't have a roadmap, it is able of doing it. So within this, you have real gold price deflated by the CPI, by the rate of inflation. And in a great bubble, in the final stage of it, the final year, the deflated price of gold comes down a little, and then it goes up. And the gold's real price has been going up. And then also I like to use gold divided by the CRB, commodity index. And I assume that the CRB is a proxy for mining costs. And in this case, you don't have to focus on the dollar price of gold. You look at the deflated price of gold. And if gold bullion is outperforming the mining costs, the gold mining business is making money, isn't it? So, and this has been the case in all of the post-bubble depressions. Everything else is under pressure, base metals, industry, commerce, agriculture. But gold's real price going up makes the gold mining sector very viable. And so it is. It's important to follow gold's real price. And then the next one is the real price of copper as representing base metals altogether. And copper real price goes up with the bubble and down with the bust. And to give you an idea of how copper stocks can do, or base metal stocks can do, the 1873 boom, years ago we stumbled on an index of mining and smelting companies from that period. And that index had a high of around 400 in 1873. And 15 years later, it was down to about 40. The base metal miners were a disaster by that measure. And then the other one that you get is that gold, the senior currency becomes chronically firm. And, of course, U.S. dollar is the senior currency. And countries like Argentina that owe huge amounts of dollars into doing payable in New York really don't like the firm dollar. And this is what really firms it up. You got the bubble over, and then the world's financial system turns to servicing debt. And if most of the debt has, or a majority of the debt has been written in U.S. dollars, due and payable in New York, that is what makes a chronically firm senior currency. And it's going to be exasperating to the Federal Reserve, whose only policy, the Fedsters only know one policy, depreciation. And whatever is going on now, the remedy is to depreciate the currency. So here you're going to have the frustration of the Federal Reserve not being able to depreciate its own currency. I mean, policy making will be by the by. So that's that one. And then, it all adds up to, and the four key points are, I say that in aggregate, they are marking the transition from a great financial bubble to a Great Depression. And I'll use that term meaning that, a Great Depression. But within this, as I say, and to repeat, the gold mining becomes very prosperous, and it's wonderful. Actually, the big gold rushes, when there was surface alluvial gold available to be discovered, 1895 or 1897, the Klondike, 1845, the California gold rushes. Well, they were a natural phenomenon because you had a high real price for gold, and the world knows it. And then at the same time, with the Great Depression, you had a huge number of men unemployed. So then that's where when alluvial gold was discovered at the surface, the prospectors, they went to California in the 1840s, and then in the Klondike in 1898 or whenever that one was, 97. So it's fascinating that the great gold rushes in history have occurred with high unemployment and a high price for gold. So now, would one look for another great gold rush? Probably all of the major surface gold, alluvial gold deposits have been found. Probably. And so there's not going to be that kind of a rush. So it seems to me that the gold rush could occur in the stock markets for big gold companies, middle and sized ones, and even juniors. And this is where more than a year ago we put together a list of how they look like promising junior gold stocks. They were included small producers, pre-production, and plus some outright exploration items. And some of those have done rather well. And one of the list on that, it's called Kosigo Resources, and I'm involved with the company. It has coming into visibility because it's gotten traded up and out of the H exchange here and onto the TSX, and that then opens the marketability for the company greatly. And at the same time, the company is preparing for drilling down in the property is in Colombia, and close to the Brazilian border, so it's quite a bit south there. And the locals like us, and even there's a little I like this is amusing, a little story here. The local contingent of FARC, the sort of terrorist group from Peru or wherever, there's a local little contingent of FARC there, and the local natives in our camp like them because they keep the environmentalists away. So everything is fine for that area of Colombia to be working in, and the company's stock has just started to increase in volume, as I said, because it's coming out of the H, and there's work started, so there's actually quite an increase in volume in the stock here today. So that's one of our lists that has moved in this week to the forefront. So pass that on to our listeners.
Very exciting. So is there any way for these brilliant bureaucrats to actually rescue the system, or is it too far gone? Overall,
no, I think it is what I call, and I haven't published this yet, what I call a tyrannical century. And if you just take a look of history since the early 1900s, it's been wars conducted upon countries, and then the bureaucrats and politicians will conduct a war against their own citizens. So it's been wars and chronic currency depreciation, inflation, and intrusion in private life. And each of these, this is the third one, Kerry. The first one was with Rome in the 3rd century. And you say, okay, well, where's your price index? Well, you don't have a price index, but the Romans were very good at documenting their currency depreciations. And there was one horrendous depreciation where our currency was a 5 denomination with 50% silver. And it ended up with 3 denomination with just a silver wash. And then that, of course, inflation went wild, and Diocletian was the emperor then, and he had an able administration and wanted to do things, so he put on price and wage control. Mm-hmm. And that turned out to be a disaster, and then the whole thing collapsed, marking the end of the first tyrannical century. Then the next one started in 1500 when all of the silver and gold bullion started to come over from the New World and arriving in Seville, the port of Seville, Spain. Spain was the supreme power then. And it was unprecedented wealth. But this shows you what governments are like. The greatest windfall in history was not enough. They had to borrow like mad and depreciate the currency, and that then marked the end of Spain as the supreme power. It just collapsed. So then the next one started in the early 1900s. You had all of these stories about Marxism and Leninism and theories. And you also had governments again becoming overactive and resorting to the printing press, shall we say, currency devaluation. And it's run its course, but now out to about 120 years. And we should look for guidance on this one. Is England in the into the early 1300s, because it was, you know, it had it did all of the inflation things, and then, early 1600s.
Mhm.
And then that's when the reform started. People just said, enough big government, and England had a very gentle reform, and it was wonderful. They called it, the following year, a writer described it as the Glorious Revolution. And again, the year following, they came in with their Bill of Rights. So what we're looking for now is another glorious revolution. And politics in the leading countries really could do with another glorious revolution, and I think it is underway. So this is the big picture stuff on that. And so what this means is that quite likely a couple of decades of depression. The usual 3 to 4 year business cycle prevails, but recoveries are weak and the recessions are noticeable. And for those in the gold business and those who appreciate societal freedom, it's going to be getting into very, very good times.
All right. Well, there's always winners. There's always losers. I just want to share with you an experience I had. I actually was in Spain, visited Madrid, and looking at it, viewing it from the historical lens of this was the greatest empire on earth, the wealthiest, and they managed to blow it. And collapses, economic collapses, wars. Finally, the Spanish Revolution. Franco becomes the dictator, and then he dies in the 70s, and then it opens up. And I was in Madrid, and looking at it through that lens, it's amazing to me. The city works. It is clean. It's safe in most places.
Yeah.
And the traffic is not terrible. The infrastructure is really great. They keep building and extending their subways. So perhaps countries can come back from the abyss, although obviously this was...
Spain seemed to miss some of the nastiness of the 80s. And also it's interesting that Philip, Emperor Philip was the powerful guy in the big Spanish boom. That's why the Philippines are called the Philippines, named after...
Right. It's amazing. So obviously, I wouldn't call them exactly a world power. They're one of the pigs, after all. The debt's out of control there, just like everywhere else in the world. I think what many people don't get is that every country in the world is drowning up to their eyeballs in debt, with the exception of Russia. So whatever happens, the global reset, it's got to happen for everyone. It can't just happen for one. I was just at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, and let me tell you, Bob, there was more money there. It was sponsored by Blackstone, and it's just rolling in cash like you cannot believe. These booths. It wasn't in the convention.
In a winning game. In a winning game, the amount of wealth generated is staggering.
It is. I have what was a relatively small position, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger. I have a theory about this, and I'm going to run it by you. They can't reset the system to gold and silver. They're never going to do that, because it means kind of giving up control. There's a lot of reasons not to do it. But if you look at the greatest performing asset in the history of man, perhaps, it's Bitcoin. 10 cents 14 years ago would now be worth about $107,000 or $8,000. who's to say it can't go 100 or 1,000 times more? And what if the United States was sitting on the largest pile of Bitcoin of anybody in the world? We know they've seized it from numerous drug dealers, money launderers, you name it, everybody. They are, they're just sitting on.
Well, I got to point out to you that with the Great Reformation, as I've been calling it, the public will force the Federal Reserve to go to a gold standard, gold convertibility. Yeah, and of course, in England, they went off of 1797, Napoleonic crazy period. They stopped payments, went off gold. There was a financial crisis. And then, in 1819 or so, they pledged to get back on gold. And I think by 1825, they were fully on gold convertibility for their pound sterling.
And that might well be the case. But what I really believe is going to happen here is that Bitcoin will go to somewhere between 10 and 50 million per coin. The U.S. will then turn around and seek to pay off their debt using a Bitcoin-based coin. And that, I believe, is how this thing ends, rather than a collapse, which in modern world, we can't have a currency, a global currency collapse, because how do you get back from it? There's no way to ever.
Here's the one that I entertain myself with, Kerry, is that, as I say, Argentina is the example. They owe dollars on debt due and payable into New York. So the amount of money, the debt bubble, is effectively a short position of U.S. dollars. Because if you have borrowed money in New York, that a loan is due and payable in U.S. dollars.
Right.
In New York, in London, in New York. And this has been the case in the past where earlier it was sterling, pound sterling, and London was the financial center. And this is the way it works. And when the bubble is over, the world changes to paying down debt, and you got to pay it down into the world's financial center in senior currency units. Right. And going from here's one that Gresham, the great trader from 1500s, after which it wasn't until 1905 that some writer guys called it Gresham's Law, but he pointed out in letters, he was the financial agent for the British Crown in the money market in Antwerp. And he wrote letters to the Crown advising. And this is where he pointed out that the worst thing in the world is to be servicing debt from a weak currency to a firm senior currency.
Yes.
And at that time, it was Antwerp and the guilder. And he actually got through to the Count, Elizabeth, and they did firm up sterling, and that made debt service a whole lot better. So this is pretty old stuff, but it's the way financial markets work.
Well, everything old is new again, but the dollar has been weak. It broke 100. Is it coming back up? What's going to happen here?
Well, I thought that that spike up to 110 at year end was celebrating the beginning of Trump's term of office as president. And then that was that. It was overbought, and then it got hit, very hard in a very fast time. So our current look now for the DX is it just got crashed. And now we think it can, we prefer that it would trade in a narrow range sideways for a few months. And we'll see what happens there. And then also we want to keep in mind that a lot of the good stuff happens as you get into mid-year. Remember the old saying, sell in May and go away.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the great financial bubbles, as they occurred in London, peaked in May or June, and then dithered around in the summer months, and then got nailed in the fall, beginning in late September. And most of them had their dreadful time in October, and then sort of settled out and set a base and cleared the markets in the middle of November, except one, the 1825 bubble, where the forced liquidation went right through November and actually into the first week in January. And I couldn't find any reason for it. It just happened that way. So we are at the time of the year when good times may be found. And then beginning in the fall, you go into October. And that typically has been the time, if there's going to be a discovery of a disaster, the discovery will be in the fall. So that's what we want to keep our eye on, Kerry.
In the fall. Well, it's always then, right? It always happens, it seems like. But also, we had some crashes in March as well. But we're past March, so we're on to we're on to the bigger and better things here, Bob. Well, I know you got this list you hinted at. How do we get the list?
Okay, yeah, just send in a request to me, Bob Hoye at shaw.ca, or to your office, and just request the list of juniors, Bob Hoye's list of juniors, and we'll be glad to send it to you.
Excellent. All right, Bob. It's always a pleasure. If you've got a question for Bob or myself, you want that list, kl@kerrylutz.com. I know I've got a couple of requests pending. I'll forward them off to you, Bob, and you can ship them out. Appreciate you coming on. We will talk to you again soon, but things are definitely getting interesting.
They are, Kerry. Fun to talk with you.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.